as usual, when I write, it is like the environment is my mirror. I usually get up very, very early in the morning to catch the sunrise. It's a magic time for anybody who creates art or any insomniac. But that was written on a very, very rainy fall morning.
So you grew up here in Cortland.
Yes,
Talk
I
about
did.
Cortland. I would never think you would find the piano necessarily or make music like that. Jazz, where did it all come from?
Well, when I was a kid, I was deaf for 2 years. They never quite figure out what it was, but it slowly came back. And in that time, those are formidable years, and while everybody else was learning, and I was saying, "What?" and losing my hearing, I just to survive it, I just made my own way of learning, and of course, there was plenty of quiet time to build everything in my mind, and what came most strong was the music. And of course, yes, I grew up in Cortland, and it was certainly more rural in those days, so I spent a lot of time in nature. And I think the feelings of the conflict of that time always, I don't want to use the word assault, but they always come rushing back when I am particularly emotional, up or down.
What conflicts?
Oh, just the basic conflicts of a kid who can't hear in grammar school. Fill in the blank.
But you grew up in a town, like I said, pretty rural. You'd think country music. How did you discover jazz? How did you discover instrumental music? Was it classical music? Were you in band?
My father was British and my mother was Italian. And there was music and fun all the time in the house. My grandmother owned an Italian restaurant on the east side of Cortland. And Cortland was filled with Italian immigrants, so no one even spoke English. It was just always character after character, you know. There was a bocce alley out in back, and pretty colorful stuff, and music always. In European society and Southern United States, everybody played something. Everyone plays something or sings, or after dinner, everyone in Italy gets together and played. The family reunions were amazing. And I understand in the South, Louisiana, after dinner, they all meet on the porch and they do their culture. So it's part of, everybody was expected to play something. So that trickled down to me.
So what was the first piece of music that you remember?
The very first piece of music I remember, my father turned me on to Peter and the Wolf.
Mm.
Which, and he explained it to me, that each instrument was one of the animals in the characters. And, you know, I don't remember the characters now, but for instance, if there was a small chipmunk, you know, and he was running through the woods, and that just comes out. You know, that's a little painting of, you can see it, you know, and a bear's like one of the happier bears. But
as a kid of the 70s, 60s, 70s, whatever, we won't give that all away.
Thank you.
You were exposed to rock. What was the first rock
absolutely.
band? First record you bought?
Oh, Patsy Cline was, I have to say, in the jukebox at my grandmother's place.
That's a bridge between the two, rock and country.
Right, and but that was my, if you put a dime in, and of course, it was an old Wurlitzer, and then I reached up with my dime, and the analog speakers, that bass,
Oh yeah,
and I used to wrap my body around.
feel it.
Yeah, and the bass would, and especially since I was starting to lose my hearing, the bass would vibrate me, and Patsy Cline's voice, it was something I didn't understand at 7, but between that beautiful fat voice and that bass vibrating my body, music was going to be it for me one way or the other.
But you went on to be in rock bands. So what rock bands, what rock and roll you talked about being into? Who's the first?
Oh,
Who's the inspiration?
Of course, the Beatles. That was the first time I saw. It was almost like before the Beatles, the world was in black and white, and when the Beatles came out, it was like all of a sudden the world was in color. That's how I remember it.
But there came a point when rock and roll didn't satisfy you, and you turned to other kinds of music, or you went back to your roots.
It's I never categorized it. As you have to remember, in those days, the radio didn't really categorize it. I mean, everything is in its little pocket now, and even their own stations, and everything's what's the word I'm looking for? Marked, pigeonholed. Those days, you'd hear Johnny Cash, and then you'd hear the Beatles, and you'd hear, it was AM radio, and you'd hear Patsy Cline, and you'd hear Jimi Hendrix within the same hour. And that's how we grew up. So I didn't really categorize then. So when I started, saying, hey, I think I'm going to play the drums in a rock band, that I knew what to do. But then, and my father again turned me on to a piece called Danse Macabre, Dance of the Dead, which is a real playful, tongue-in-cheek Halloween favorite about again, another sound painting, like a movie of at midnight on Halloween, all the skeletons pop up out of the graves, and they dance around and play violins, and it's all like augmented for us. Bum, bum. And I'll just by arm. Yeah, da da da. And so that stuff like Peter and the Wolf and Danse Macabre kind of just led me to visual and sound were the same thing to me, especially in the depths of, I wasn't stone deaf, but I was. So visual and sound became one thing. So to this day, if I see something or someone, I'll hear it as well in my mind.
But you were drumming? When did you go from drumming to the piano?
There was a piano in the house. I always did this.
But it's not necessarily likely that a drummer can make the transition to becoming a piano player with 88 keys and not just 2 sticks and a bunch of skins.
Is this where I tell the drummer jokes? Don't start.
You can give us a drummer joke. You want to throw in a drummer joke? It's your chance.
Why does he carry a turd in his wallet?
Well, whatever, in my family, especially me and my younger brother, whatever we got our hands on, we made music out of it.
So they had to watch your hands, take those sticks away from you, and so there you go.
Well, by the time my brother Michael was 7, he's a great drummer. He's New York session guys.
So
he's on this Muddy Dove rock and roll thing. That's him.
So when did you start? When did you start recording? So you went from playing around in the family to what age did you finally begin to cohere it to bands and get it to the place where you could record?
Well, I went and studied with George Papastavro and Dr. Brian Israel at Cross College, Syracuse University, and they organized it. They showed me how to organize it. They recognized it, and I didn't really start playing piano properly until I was probably 18. You know, that everything was just I'd come over and try to figure out a vocal part, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I was going to go play football in Michigan at this satellite school at Michigan State. And I went to my dad. Eventually I said, I don't think I'm ready to be that far away from home. And I thought he was going to be mad at me. And I said, I don't think I want to play football anymore. And he walked up to me and put his arms around me and says, thank God, I thought you were never going to wake up. What do you want to do? I said, I don't know. I think it's something with music. So I hung for a year and worked. And he came up with the idea of music school. And I said, well, I don't really know music. He said, well, you got a year to learn. And I did.
And when did you end up in New York after that?
I went to Cross for 3 years. Quit, studied for a little while with Dr. Israel. And left. I ended up in New York 1980, 81. And, stayed there for 16 years and recorded. Oh, but before I left, my first recording was my brother and I. We had a punk band called The Numbers, and we wrote a little rock opera in it. You know, he was still in that's him. He was still in high school. And this is a later on, man. We've been in so many bands together, and we sent it to this guy named David Geffen, who was just kind of starting to happen. And he wrote us a letter, a handwritten letter. And my brother still got it. And he really liked the stuff and keep going. And it was original stuff. Anyway, long story short, moved to New York. Old friend of mine, Doug Thaler. I went to see him right away. Motley Crue's manager. And he had some sound advice. And I didn't take any of it, and we laugh about it to this day. And
If you did, you'd probably be in one of those towers there and not be back in Cortland.
yeah, I'd be in one of those towers, all right.
Not the crazy ones.
Locked.
Not the crazy ones. Well, you know, the foibles of youth.
Yes.
But you grew up. You had a child grew up.
Yes, that's when I grew up, when I had the child, my beautiful daughter, Kayla.
So how did that affect you musically? Where did that take you musically?
The birth of my child?
And obviously that got you into jazz. That's where you really focused more on learning jazz as well and improvising.
As anyone with a child knows, the whole world shuts down for quite a while, including my musical world. I was in New York when Kayla was born, doing very well. Studio work, lots of gigs, lots of attention, a couple of tours. When my daughter was born, I pretty much, we moved up here. And got a straight job and brought her up.
Stop.